Hello everyone, and we're getting back to our program. And next, I am delighted to introduce Katherine Luchaninova from Aligned Research Group, international company working on a huge amount of really breakthrough projects in the sphere of artificial intelligence. And Katherine will do now a workshop for you so that you could start building your product, start going through the roadmap to success. The mic is yours, Kate. Good luck.
Thank you. Right. So this is a pleasure to give this workshop, and I'm feeling very honored and delighted to join Touch again. This is the second time, and I'm glad that I get to share some of the knowledge that we have been implementing in the development of my company. And well, to tell you a bit about us, we are not only just an international IT consultancy, we were born and bred in California. And after that, we started taking all over bit by bit. Now we have a subsidiary in different countries in Europe. We have subsidiaries in Russia. We have subsidiaries in Brazil. And we're about to open another subsidiaries in other parts of the world. And the part of the strategy that we have been using to, well, get the acquisition of this international markets is what we're going to see in this workshop. Now, we have created it so it can actually help people from very different levels of, well, preparedness. So it doesn't matter like how much you know about building a roadmap. It should help you in any way. You will see some of the basics. We're just going to take apart all the structure that is the most important part of the building the roadmap. And hopefully you will use it as a guideline to build your own roadmap, the one that we will be looking through on our feedback session on Sunday. Now we're going also to take a look at, well, we're going to use as an example the strategy of the internet marketing, which is probably the easiest thing to use as an example. So let's start, let's dig in. The contents of our workshop would be the description of the roadmap itself. We're going to take a look at when do we need the roadmap, what are the types of the roadmap, how should it look like, the PDCA, the adaptation of the roadmap, as in who actually we're building this roadmap for, and then we're going to take a look exactly at how we're building the roadmap. Now, the roadmap itself is a graphic display, or it is a master plan with the designation of the main stages, key goals, and deadlines. It is the main document for implementing any strategy for any project or product. It is a universal tool for planning and synchronizing work on any project, and it is used in a variety of fields. When do we need it? Well, basically, we need it obviously when we're starting a new project. When we have also significant changes in the projects that we already have or that we are already implementing. That's to say, imagine that you are a perfume company and all of a sudden you decided that you want to tap into makeup market and you're launching your own line. So this is also when you need the roadmap to just guide you through all these possible changes in this new market. Then the competition intensified. Like you see that the niche that you occupy on the market has been taken over by other companies. So you just want to do it better. And then when it is required to draw up a strategic plan for the vision of a competitive development, which is pretty much the same as a competition intensified. Now also, this presentation will have a lot of text. We decided to go with more textual than a graphic representation, just so those who might struggle a bit with understanding what I'm saying can read it easily. Plus, after this workshop and after Touch is over, you will have access to it, so you can have it, you know, in front of your eyes. I think it should be much better. Now, when we are talking about the types of the roadmap, we have different ones. So there is a product roadmap. There is the scenario for the development of the product itself or the product line over a certain period of time. Then we have a technological roadmap. which is the development plan of the technology that you're planning to incorporate in the development of your project. The industrial roadmap or market roadmap. This is a development of the schemes for entire industries or the different segments of the market, or sometimes different sectors of the industry, not just the entire one. Then we have the corporate roadmap. That is the action plan for the development of the company, the achievement of key goals and indicators. But we should not never confuse it with the business plan. It is absolutely a different thing. The roadmap is just a strategic and a long-term document, when the business plan is basically your beginning document. Then we have the educational roadmap, which is for training and development programs. It includes like the employee card sometimes. So this is like a report cards that employees use as an individual plans for improving their skills or their professional development. Also, it can be the plan of lessons is also considered to be a roadmap. And the last one, and probably the one that we're going to be focusing on today, is the project map. This is the implementation of the plans for any projects, indicating the main stages, a time limit, and a predetermined target corridor. Now, we're interested in the last type because it can be used in any field of, well, now we're going to be focusing on the digital market, the development of internet projects, for example, in marketing and management, and it can be used mostly by product managers for project management and budgeting. Now, how should the roadmap look like? The whole purpose of the roadmap, that it is the main document of the implementation of the strategy, and it reflects the mission and the goals of the project. This is probably the most important point of it. But it also demonstrates all the key actions that we have to take, all the key team players that are participating in the development of the project, and it synchronizes project participants. Now, the successful launch of projects is obviously impossible without the planning, and the basis of a plan is a strategy. And for the implementation, this is why we need this auxiliary tool. Now, the roadmap project itself is a visual representation of the implementation of the strategy. So in fact, it is like, imagine that this is a master plan that covers the main milestones. Now, the key elements that we always have in a successful roadmap are the team. Obviously, those are the people who are implementing the project. The audience, we have to take into consideration people for who we are creating our project. Then the project goals. What are the actions that we have to take to implement our project successfully? And the visual elements. These are the movement patterns. So people sometimes use tables, they use graphs, they use drawings. The most common thing lately, and the easiest one, is to create a roadmap in the Excel. Although there are different tools that you can even Google. So if you just go online and put a roadmap simulator, you can find about a bunch of different ones, and they're all nice. It just depends on what exactly is it that you want to use and how you want it to look like. Now, the contents of the roadmap, which are obviously something that we always have to think about as well, are the most important part is the goal of the project. Now, like in any other activity, like in any other thing that you are doing, you have to clearly picture how you're going to be achieving your goal. What is it that you want to do? What are the necessary activities and what are the responsibilities that you have to take in order to achieve your goal? What are the basic requirements for work? So it might be sometimes that you want to figure out what is it exactly that the technical side of your project is. What are the time intervals? So you have to put yourself significant deadlines. It might be defined but in different stages, as in we're spending, for example, 1 week on a roadmap itself, then we're spending about 2 weeks on achieving this strategy, and so on and so on. So when you have a very clear time schedule, so when you have this time frame, it also helps a lot. You can make it flexible, you can make it more strict, it's all up to you. Now, the milestones. Milestones at every stage of the projects are something that helps people to stay motivated. and the alternative options for implementation. So the alternative options are very important because when you have the main project, the main idea, you always have to have a backup in case something fails. Now, memo to self. This is very important, and I really want everyone to remember this for, well, every single day or every single situation when you are developing your roadmap. The well-composed roadmap contains just one realistic goal and several options for achieving it. This is basically just what I said about the backup plan. The priority is always given to a plan that is most profitable one, in your opinion, but you always have to have the rest of, or about like 2 or 3 plans, well, perfectly, that could be applied in case of a force majeure. So when you have the force majeure, it's always good to have a backup plan. It might be not as well thought of, or it might be not as amazing as the original one, but please, always when you're building the roadmap, have a plan just, in the back of your head that you might use in case everything goes bad. Now, the PDCA, this is the so-called plan, do, check, and act, which basically roadmap provides a flexible management and improvement of each project or process through the use of the Doming cycle, which is a PDCA itself. And it is an abbreviation of scientific methodology that basically means that P stands for planning. This is the definition of the strategy. This is the goal setting. The do, well, which is the fulfillment of what you're planning to do. This is an identification of the main milestones and steps. Then we have the check, which is the verification. You have to monitor the effectiveness of the actions that you're taking. And then the C, which is basically act, we have the correction and action, which is an audit. It is the analysis on the corrections information of the standard of your roadmap. So once you have that all done, once you pass through the stages of PDCA, you have the completed roadmap. Now, taking it more into details, when we talk about the adaptation of the roadmap, we have to keep it in mind that we have different audiences. So you have to identify yours first. You should know if it is you're going to build this roadmap that should be targeted at your customers and partners. Then you should be focusing on the main benefits of the product. And this is an external document, so it should be attractive. It should be very understandable, easy, manageable, and accessible. If it is for sales managers, then it has to be including the available features and the customer benefits. So you have to give your sales team something they can use in order to attract more people for your project, well, the customers. And then if we're talking about developers, this is probably the easiest roadmap that you can build because in my experience, when you're giving the roadmap for developers, it's normally just breaking down different time frames with the milestones. You don't need any graphic representation normally. You just set up the tasks that have to be done, because they basically just focus on the breakpoints, on the release, or on the features of different technologies that they're going to develop if it's the case. Now we're going straight to the building of the roadmap, since we have all that, I think, covered. Now, the only well thought out strategy that allows the company to achieve market leadership. Implementation of the roadmap, the successful one, includes 3 steps. We have first the positioning. We have to think about the fundamental direction that is based on the opportunities, and we should take into account all the strength and all the weaknesses of our business. I know this is not something that people like to hear, like when they are building a roadmap, they have to think about what they're bad at. But believe me, once you actually think about what you can be failing at, you can find a solution on how to get better. Then the second is the product itself. What is it that we're creating for a sustainable competitive advantage that will strengthen the chosen direction? We have to find the key features why our product is much better than any other product. The third one is the analysis. That helps us to identify the target audience and the competitors, and basically draws up an action plan to increase the competitiveness. The KIT strategy also has the following features. It solves the tasks. It has specific goals and starting points. It contains an accessible platform that everyone can use. So when we're talking about the accessible platform, we're talking about how we're building the roadmap, what tools are we using for it. So if your team is more into using Excel, then use that. If you want to use, sometimes people use even Trello boards, which is also great. And it's also very comprehensive and it's very easy to manage. I personally suggest that if you decide to build something for your internal team, that you use that. And then the roadmap, the strategy, it has to be concise. It has to be very understandable. So when you build one, you have to make sure that every single person on your team, that they have no questions about what you are doing. And the last one, which is also very important, is the methods that you're going to use to solve this problem. The methods have to always be flexible. You don't have to restrict people to using only this or that set of their skills. If you think that the person can contribute more, please don't limit them. Give them the freedom of actually just showing what they can do. The project description. As a content, as you all know, this is basically just like any other product that we might have. Even if you just take, I don't know, any website, well, any online shop, before you buy something, there's always a description of what they have. So this is the same for the project, for your product that you're going to be building the roadmap for. You need the short description. So it always has to be very concise. It has to be easy to read, and it has to be straight on point. No one likes it when the description of what you're planning to implement, of what you're planning to do, has a lot of different words and actually has nothing to do with the topic. So instead of saying that, I don't know, that this miraculous device that we might be using in the future for communicating with our ancestors and blah, 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 that is actually the phone. Instead of that, just say that this is a high-notch technological device that we use every day, and it has these features. That's it. So this is like what the type of concise it has to be. And then competitive advantages. I do stress a lot on this, because when you know your own competitiveness, when you know who are the people that you go against this is going to save you a lot of trouble. It actually going to save you a lot of also surprises, because sometimes, and we've seen it a lot in different companies before, and I personally saw it especially in the startups that are just beginning, that those who haven't done their analysis of the competitive market, they, for example, hired someone to work on the development of their amazing project. And then it turned out that the person who was the last one to join their team actually worked for their competitors. And they basically just lost the whole idea, they lost the whole project, and it has to basically just go to trash. Which actually brings me to a very, very important memo for everyone, that if you're starting your own startup, if you're the owner or you're in the management position and you're taking the new people on your team, please don't forget to sign the NDA. This is very essential, and it can actually save you a lot of nerves in the future. Now, market positioning. You have to clearly identify where on the market you stand. You have to know exactly what is the definition of your niche. Which category do you fall under? So what are the specifics that you have to keep in mind? When you know all this, it will be easier for you to identify your target audience. Now, the features that may affect promotion. So you have to think about, again, all the plus sides and all the minuses that you can come across. So when you do the promotion of your project, you have to understand that sometimes cold calls, for example, and cold emails are not going to work for certain types of product. Why? Imagine that you have a very complicated system that you have to integrate. Let's say that you do the extra security shield for some cybersecurity company, and you identify and you build the pipelines for the data that they have and that they process. Obviously, this is not something that you can just call a person that you don't know out of the blue and tell them, hi, I don't know, my name is Alice and I work for the Secure Guard company. We offer this and this. Do you want to buy it? This is our features. Obviously, the person can tell you that, okay, we are interested, but we need more details. And no one ever is going to tell you that, yeah, sure, this is exactly what I was looking into right now. I need it right now. So let's keep it rolling. You have to know exactly how easy or how hard it is for you to sell your product. Once you identify it, it will be easier for you to actually find the promotional methods that you're going to use in order to fulfill your goal. If you're using some complex systems like the one I just so briefly described that I just came up with, you should prefer away from all the cold emails. This is not going to help you as much as the cold calls is an absolute no-no. If you have a subscription-based product, something like, let's take it as an example, the Canva, which is an amazing tool that helps you to build your own presentations, logos, and everything without using the designer. If you have something like this, which is subscription-based and it has a very low price, easily, you can use any cold market or tool there is. But if we're talking about the most enhanced one, more complicated ones, you should take into consideration that it's always, and I'm talking from experience over the last 6 years, it's always better to make this kind of deals in person. So invest and go into the conferences and use your network, but try to avoid all the cold methods. Right, now moving forward, the goals. Obviously, we have to have the assessment features. You have to know your ROI, which is the return on investment. You have to know when exactly will you get your money back, the one that you put into this project. You have to know your KPI, which is the achievement of key performance indicators. You have to know exactly how you can achieve that. You have to have at least a blurred plan. Then you have to analyze and you have to mark what is your current performance. Where do you think you're lacking? Where do you think that you're doing well? And then you have to plan the indicators, how to make the current performance much better and how to achieve the ROI and the KPIs that you want by maybe transforming a bit the current performance that you have. And target audience. This is something important. Obviously, I'm going to repeat myself a lot in this presentation because one thing leads to another and they're all linked. You have to know your target audience. Selling medical supplies, for example, to ice cream vendor, it's just stupid. And I've seen a lot of people who are just starting with marketing when they're trying to get their own database. They are going through LinkedIn, for example, and they just put one keyword and then they just start emailing every single person that comes up in the list. And this is not correct because you have to know, you have to actually dig deeper. You have to analyze people that you're going to be in contact with. You have to do the audience segmentation. You segment it by sometimes income, if this is subscription-based, for example, product that you have. If you're selling it to, if it's not a B2C, but it's a B2B type of product, you have to identify also the industries, all the market niches, everything. And you have to know the user portraits. Unfortunately, we won't have a lot of time to talk about all of this in very, very details, but I'm going to tell you more about it once we reach the example. Now, the competitive analysis. When we do the competitive analysis, when we're trying to get into understanding what are the, let's say, who are the people that we go against, we have to know what are the key performance indicators of them. Like we have to know the differences between them and between us. What makes them better than us? How can we actually achieve what they do? What is their source of traffic? Like, if we are looking into internet marketing, so what are the sources of their data? Where do they get the search results? How are they doing their advertisement? The optimization for mobile devices, this is basically about how you can use different mobile apps on achieving your goals. Also about the competitors, a very important part that I should never forget to say, that there are two types of competitors. You have the direct ones. So those are the people who have absolutely the same product, and the indirect ones. They have a different product, but it's all the same need. So this is something that you have to study. And obviously, always, when you do the analysis of the competitors, firstly, analyze the direct competitors, which are the market leaders in your sector. Then do the analysis on the remaining direct and indirect competitors. When we're analyzing the website, for example, which is the SEO and the social networks, also they're basically just the distribution channels that we use, we have to look for the convenience of the website itself for the user. How well thought out is the navigation? So every single product has a website. We have to make sure that the website that we have is actually easy to navigate. No one wants to spend hours and hours clicking on different buttons just to find the information that they need. This is very tiring. This is very confusing for some people. And let's just be honest, when you have a lot of information on your website, it might turn out worse for you than you actually expect it to be. So when you're building a website that will be linked to your product, please make it as easy as possible. Use a minimalistic approach. Try to not hide information, but at least make it compact, especially if you want to include a lot of things. Maybe hide it under the pictures. It's actually, it looks very pretty and it might help you. What else? Now, sorry about that. The targeted advertising and the contextual advertising, this is something, well, here we have the selection of promotional channels. So these two are very important. Why? You can set the targeted advertising anywhere. You can use it on different social media. You can use it on emails. You can use it on a professional websites. So targeting is actually something that has been used very much to achieve any goals. But it is important to know your audience first. The contextual advertising is, it exists mostly because a lot of people who have websites, they put the text that they put on their websites, it shows up in the search. So pay attention to what you write. Know exactly what you need. The content marketing, this is something that will work for you amazingly if you have the B2C product. For example, like all of us, we know how the advertisement on Facebook works. Like you just scroll in your feed and you see that someone is actually like, there's like popping images and everything. And this is related to something that you looked up on Google. So Google basically just saves this information and then it shares, it's an open stack of information that other websites use. It's not only the content, it's also targeted. So sometimes you might be falling into this category, or sometimes it can be just pulled out of different sources. Also, what else? The targeted advertising, which is important, it's just social media, mostly nowadays. Despite of what I said, that you can use it everywhere, nowadays most people just use it for social media, which I think it's a bit, it's not as good as it could be, because we have used sometimes targeted advertising in one startup to achieve new clients through YouTube, which worked amazingly well for us. And I do recommend it for any B2C projects. Then SMM, obviously this is a social media marketing, which is creating, promoting communities, posts, that working with opinion leaders. If you can actually invite someone relevant, someone important from your field who is also has a very good presence on social media, it would work for you. Like working with the audience in instant messengers, also like it is included here. So when you keep in contact with people who might be buying your project, your product, and you give them feedback on their questions instantly, it works better for you. The email marketing and mailing. I personally think that this is quite old school already, that it doesn't make that much sense anymore. And I just get very, very frustrated every time I open my mailbox and I see all this very useless emails. So I just delete them instantly. But if you have a subscription-based product again, and you offer some discounts, stick to that. From what I know, about 70% of the people who used to read newsletters, they don't do that anymore. So you can keep your ideas to yourself. The digests and newsletters, they are good if you actually have a very interesting blog on some topics that you have been developing over some time. But if not, stick to something important. So don't send useless emails. But if you actually decide that this is something that you have to do, work with the existing database of the leads. Building this database, you can do this through advertisement, you can do it through just hand-picking people, or sometimes it's just your personal contacts. But again, cold emails, please lay off it if you can. Video marketing, which is basically used on YouTube. This is a creation, distribution of the content on video hosting sites. Then we have the crowd marketing. The crowd marketing works with the image of a company. So this is like a product or service in a thematic communities and forums. So you have to place your product, for example, under consideration of the public. There have been some experiments of some startups who did it on Quora. For those who don't know, Quora is the online community where you can discuss any question. So a lot of times, some of the startups, especially in Latin America, they have been tapping into Quora and they have been asking questions like, oh, I'm thinking about launching this thing, but we don't know if it's going to be good. What do you guys think? And these are the features. And people were actually giving them feedback. So to test the theory, if you think that your product could be good, but you're not very sure about it, try the crowd marketing. Getting the feedback from real people is very good. Obviously, putting a specific brand or, the image or the link to your website also helps if you decide to do this. And working with the reviews is very beneficial. Not only it can give you a feedback on how your product looks like, sometimes you can get valuable ideas on how to push your idea and your product forward. So you can actually shape it and customize it so it will be more interesting for the people. Now, the last but not least one, this is the, no, wait, it's not the last one. We have two more. Yeah, the CRM marketing. It's just you work with the customer base that you have. The modern CRMs, they allow you to send newsletters. So this is linked to email marketing. And it helps you to choose a comparison of different customer relationship management systems. But that's basically it. The referral advertising. This is something very interesting. So this is for the users that come to your website from other sites. It works if you use the advertisement Sorry about that. If you use the advertisement, especially the targeted one, on social media, for example, or on the website of your friend who decided to put a link to your products or your website there. So it can be the native advertising, or it can be a guest post, for example, on Facebook, or it can be a review. It can be exactly the same review or post on Quora, or some blogger post or forum, etc. Something like this. Why the referral advertising is good? A lot of people try to use it, especially in one sledge with using social media. For example, you have the leader of your community. Well, we're talking about, let's say, industry. So the person who is very well known in this area posts about your product. People are interested in it, so they're passing through. So this way we know that this blogger is actually like getting hits on being read, and you're getting certain hits on having an interesting product. So people do want to know more. Now, the communication strategy. This is something that obviously you have to know. And the way that you shape your messages, for example, the tone of the voices or the voice of your message, it's very important. It determines the tone of how you're conducting your social networks. So it's like the general intonation. There is a huge difference between, hey, I want to sell you something, and hello, I have something that you might be interested in. Why don't you take a look at it? So when you are using less aggressive point of, persistence, this is much better. So there were some companies that tried to test this theory, and they were going very rough and hardcore. And they were like straightforward, like, hey, you have to buy our product because we're better than this guy. And some people liked it, but a lot of people said, oh, that's just a joke. We don't like it when people talk to us this disrespectfully. So keep your jokes to yourself. Try to be polite and try to be consistent on your message. The communication format with the audience, which is a communication format, it sets the rules for communication with the audience representatives in different channels. Again, this is about you choosing how you're going to address your audience. If it's going to be more formal or informal, so this is about this. Also, you have to remember about the editorial policy. This is about the editorial standards for the quality of the materials that you're publishing. So it explains, for example, what the author is responsible for and what the editor is responsible for. It is also important to remember that when you're talking about the editorial policy, there are some words that you cannot use in your advertisement, for example. You cannot say that your product, that you have, that you sell butter, for example, like something that, everyone uses in everyday life. A lot of people love eating butter every meal or something, but you cannot in your advertisement put something like the best butter in the world, because the words like best, amazing, or the most blah 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 are prohibited from usage in the context of social media. The list is quite large, so if you're interested in what you can use and what you cannot use, you should Google it. And trust me, you'll find a lot of interesting things there. The content plan. This is important, obviously, like everything else. The content formats. So this is about what we're using. It's photos, videos, it's text, what kind of pictures, maybe infographics, etc., that we're going to use in what we're launching. So the quality requirements, which will be emphasized. So we have to make sure that everything that we use is not a raw material. It's not something like the description that can be worked on and made better at some point, but it has to be like top-notch final. Never launch anything if you're not sure that this slogan, for example, will work with people. It's better to test different ideas on random people. So personally, I prefer to test the contents on people who are not related to my industry. So it can be like my friends or also the crowd marketing. I'm a huge fan of crowd marketing. I do believe that every single point of roadmaps or any plans or like even the graphics or any idea, the crowd marketing is probably the most interesting thing that you might get, because people are quite unfiltered with their opinions. They will tell you exactly what they think. So if you have an opportunity to test your content on other people, do that. But never publish anything that is just half raw. The categories. This is a list of key areas of the social networks that we're using. So you have to know exactly which one you're going to be implementing. And the publication plan. So this is just a selection of topics in the calendar plan. So it's, for example, it's good not only for the internet marketing that we're discussing now, but it's good for if you are an IT company, for example, or industry like travel industry company, and you have a blog where you are sharing your insights or like just publications or something interesting. If you have a plan of how many videos or text you have to publish in 1 month, that's best. But there is a catch. If you set a certain limit or a high grade, well, of what you have to say and how many times a year, don't go lower. So if, for example, you do 4 publications a month, keep it at 4. Don't do it at 3 or don't do it at 1, but try to keep it up. Now, the team, we're almost over with the main part of the roadmap. Team is obviously like when you're discussing the consistency of the team that you have, it has 3 different categories. So first is leaders and executives. So these are the people who have the responsibilities. Like you have to know who will be responsible for a certain team that develops this thing, or who will be responsible for the administrative stuff. Then you have to have a very clear distribution of the roles. You have to clearly define the functions of all the participants. Like you have to know exactly who is doing what, because if you don't have that, and especially if you have a team that is about 20 people, sometimes it's very hard to navigate it. And then you have to know and you have to identify who is responsible for the tasks. Now you have to have a clear record of those who are responsible for what. Basically, the first one, which is about leaders and executives, and third one, which is responsible for the tasks, they are the similar ones, but there is still like a very thin difference. And the last part of the example that we have is the analysis. This is something that you have to do. The analysis is something that helps you to define the performance metric, for example, for each channel, if you're working with social media or internet marketing, or you're using that to move forward your product. If you don't have an understanding of what to take as an example for your performance metrics, you can first set up a test period. So when you're building the time frame for your product, build a test period first. Actually, this is probably good not only for internet marketing itself, but for any product. Well, actually, yeah, it's for any product, any project. It's a good thing, because when you have a test period, you can try different alternatives of what will work best. Like if you might remember in the beginning, I said that not only it is important to have the main strategy of achieving your goal, it's also good to have alternatives that you will use in case that everything goes bad. So during this test period, if you have this opportunity, and I do encourage you to always invest your time in having this opportunity, try to test at least 2 additional theories with the first one to see which one you can actually put in motion immediately if you face some difficulties. It not only will save you some time when you're facing the crisis, it also will show that you're an efficient manager, that you know exactly how to navigate through the stress. And if you're just a startup or a student who's planning to start their career and they have the project in their mind, this will help you during the most stressful times. Setting up the test period is something very important for any project. Then we have to choose the analytical systems that we will use. For example, there is Google Analytics, which is the most used one, for example, the Google Tag Manager, and etc. If you are working with other markets than, European, for example, or United States, or something that is not as mainstream, that has Google Analytics, and you want to do something else, please, you're welcome to find something local, or you can use these ones. These are the most used ones, and they're easy. They do have a lot of different buttons and options that might be confusing at some point, but in general, they are the easiest one. Then you have to set the frequency for the evaluating reports. So during the time that you have set for your roadmap application, you have to have as milestones, you have to have the evaluation as well. So once you reach first of the milestones, you have to look back and you have to see what you did, what was wrong, what was good, and only then you should move forward. Because unless you see that there was something bad and you did not fix it, and you just said, we'll reach this goal, so it works, why should we put any more effort into fixing it? This is not how it's supposed to be. You should be sure that not only you have the upper hand with your competitors, but you also, what you do is smooth and seamless. Then indicating the frequency of review of the strategy normally is based on historical data. So if you don't want to be operating by the milestones, although I do encourage you to do that, you can do the quarter reviews or like yearly reviews or etc. But try to do these reviews at least every quarter. It will help you to see your mistakes before they actually take a drastic change. Well, they make a drastic change in your plans. And you can use different things like A/B tests for it, for example, or you can use the data from analytics systems, or you can use the interviews, or you can use the polls. From experience, it is very good to use the opinion of the people you work with when you're doing this reviews. So when you do, circling back, as you already understood, I'm a huge fan of doing this reviews when you're hitting certain milestones. So when you hit the milestone, do the following. Firstly, take a look at what you did. Think about what you could have done better. Then try to identify what possibly went wrong, but you managed to go through it. Think about what you can do to not let it happen ever again. Then try to think about what you can do even better, and then talk to your teammates. Listen to them. Take into consideration their thoughts and opinions, because people around you, they can give you a better perspective from their angle, and sometimes it might surprise you that, for example, the person who just, prints documents for you can actually tell you that, I think that thing is not working because the text is too long, or that it has a very wrong feeling, like when you read it, you don't feel what you have to feel. You'll be really surprised how different people who you would not expect to be important in your projects can actually help you. Now, the last one, this last thing about the analysis is that the strategy should be easy to read and it should be very easy to understand. There can be two versions that can be made. So there can be a full version of the strategy or the roadmap. But it should be used for internal team only. So this is the very detailed description of what you have to do. And then you can make a shortened version of your roadmap. That's the version that you normally share with the shareholders, the investors, those who don't want to know the technical side. Obviously, I'm not talking about the investors in the venture funds, for example, because these guys, they have to know all the details. But a lot of times I've come across different investors or business angels who just wanted to give money and maybe just take a quick look at what the people are doing, and that was enough for them. You also can use, you can have the shortened roadmap, maybe without all the critical information up on the crowd marketing platforms to get the ideas from the people. So that would be a good one. The document with the full company strategy has to be protected by the NDA or another trade secret version. Keep that in mind together with signing the NDA with every single person that you're working with. So to sum it up, for the guidelines and for the roadmap itself, always keep in mind the most important part, which is the PDCA, the plan, do, check, and act. This is a cycle that every roadmap is based on. Always identify your target audience. You have to know who you're appealing to. You have to know the people. You have to know exactly who are you trying to hit in order to, reach your goal. Then you have to have the guidelines for creating your strategies. The most important part of the guideline is that you have to know your competitors. Once you have your competitors and once you have set your task, it should be easier from there. So write it out on the paper. It may be long, it may be short. Sometimes, even for us, even though we are a company with tons of experience of launching these things, we do create a joint document where we write down the idea and then we just spread it and everyone can contribute. So if you do that, it can work even better because you never know who will have another perspective on your idea. So formulate specific goals for a specific period of time. So for example, if your goal is to increase market shares to 30% per year, increase the average check by 10% or increase the conversion by 1. So try to set not only specific goals, but also accessible ones. Don't set goals, for example, I have 50,000 subscribers now on my Instagram. I need 1 million by the end of the month. This is something that is probably not going to happen unless you cause a very huge scandal on the internet. Again, the segmentation that we've talked about, the target audience, is important. Target audience, and I cannot stress it enough, is important. You have to know who you're appealing to. Especially if you're a B2C project, know your audience. Divide it in segments, in smaller groups that has each own needs, values, and pains. You have to understand the pains of who you're appealing to. You have to know exactly what problems you're solving. And analyze everything you do. Every single step. It's better to overthink than not to do it. And I think that in general, that would be it. And I think it's time for the questions, if anyone might have any. I'm not sure if our moderator will join us back on this part, but I'm guessing there would be questions, no questions?
I think people will need to overthink what they have just heard. A lot of really great information. Thank you, Katherine, for it. And if anyone has questions, you can always find Katherine and in the attendee list. Katherine, are you with us also in the attendee list?
I think so. I should be.
Yes, you were invited, so just check the profile. And if you guys have any questions, you can always send a message to Katherine, actually, or just text it in the event chat, and we will help you to connect. We have the question: how to use roadmap with agile software development?
So when you're using agile, it's this agile and waterfall is something very basic and something that I don't really like, although everyone is using it. So it's basically just as developing the technological roadmap, which is a bit different from what I said. But again, if you don't mind, like it's quite a big answer. I can give it back to you on the feedback session that we have on Sunday with some examples.
I think that would be possible. But
I think that would be best because like I took a lot of time describing the product roadmap. The agile software, it falls under different category, and it's a very interesting one. But I do want to take my time, more than 3 minutes that are left, to answer on that.
Yeah, okay. So Lasha, if you will be with us on Sunday on feedback session, you will get the broad response. But meanwhile, you can reach out to Katherine and just discuss it on maybe one-on-one call, if you'd like to.
Yeah, it could be possible easily.
Perfect. Any other questions? Not yet. Yeah. It would be great. Thanks, says Lasha. Awesome.
Okay, perfect. Then that's what we will start our feedback session with, how to use the roadmap with agile software development. Also, basically, if anyone is interested in another types of the roadmaps that we took a look at, feel free to send me a message and I'd be happy to tell you more about it. And I do encourage all of you to try and build at least a draft of the roadmap that we can take a look at. And you can pass it to me and then we'll just go over some mistakes or hiccups that you could have just faced during developing one.
That's perfect. I think no questions anymore. No, yes. Okay, not yet. Yeah, as I say, a lot of information. I'm still also thinking on some of the parts. It's really interesting. Thank you a lot, Katherine, for your really open, great elaboration on the topic. See you on the feedback session, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
See
Have
you
a
on
good day.
Saturday.
Bye.